At exactly 2:17 p.m. in the Gulf of Oman, 68 Iranian sailors inside a Russian-built submarine made a decision that would later become a powerful example of how older weapons can still pose real danger. The Iris Tarek, one of Iran's 3 operational Kilo-class diesel-electric submarines, had been quietly following the USS Nimitz carrier strike group for 41 hours. Through a periscope designed during the Reagan administration, the submarine's captain watched the carrier's wake, carving bright trails across the blue water. Range: 11,200 meters. Bearing: steady. Speed: constant. On paper, the numbers looked perfect. They weren't. The Nimitz was not alone. 87 nautical miles to the southwest, a Virginia-class attack submarine, USS Mississippi, had been tracking Tarek since it left Bandar Abbas 6 days earlier. Every mechanical noise, every propeller rotation, every moment when the submarine's diesel engines surfaced to recharge batteries had been recorded. American forces knew the submarine's position long before the Iranian navigator finished calculating the attack course. Inside the submarine's hull, the crew believed they still had the element of surprise. They didn't. Submarine warfare follows simple, unforgiving physics. You can't strike what you can't reach, and you can't reach an opponent that has been watching you from angles you can't detect. The Iranian crew was operating a submarine built in the early 1990s, using torpedo technology rooted in the 1970s. Their target was a carrier protected by a surveillance network that treats the ocean like a 3-dimensional battlefield. The difference in capability wasn't just a few years, it was generations. The Kilo-class submarine itself represents solid Cold War engineering, but maintaining it has proven difficult. Iran purchased 3 of these boats from Russia between 1992 and 1996 for roughly $600 million each. Each vessel measures about 74 meters long with a surface displacement of around 2,300 tons. Diesel-electric propulsion allows them to operate quietly underwater, though it limits both speed and endurance. Maximum submerged speed reaches about 17 knots with an operational depth near 240 meters. The hull is covered with anechoic tiles meant to absorb sonar signals, reducing detection by enemy systems. But the warm, highly corrosive waters of the Persian Gulf make maintaining those coatings difficult. Over time, sections deteriorate, creating acoustic signatures that are louder than the designers originally intended. Inside Tarek, the crew interpreted the silence around them as proof they were undetected. Surface ships in the strike group hadn't changed course. No alarms had sounded. To them, that meant invisibility. What they didn't realize was that modern anti-submarine warfare rarely reveals detection immediately. You observe, you record, you wait. Inside the submarine's narrow weapons compartment, Torpedo Tube 1 flooded with seawater in preparation for launch. Loaded inside was a test 71 Mk torpedo, the export version of a Russian wire-guided heavyweight torpedo introduced in the early 1980s. It weighs about 1,820 kilograms and carries a 205-kilogram high-explosive warhead. Powered by silver zinc batteries, the weapon can travel at roughly 40 knots with a maximum range close to 20 kilometers when running at lower speeds. Its guidance system relies on a thin copper wire that trails behind the torpedo as it moves through the water. Through that wire, the submarine's fire control computer sends steering corrections, guiding the weapon toward its target. When the torpedo gets close enough, the wire disconnects and the onboard sonar activates, allowing the weapon to lock onto the target during the final phase. In theory, this gives the launching submarine control for most of the attack. In practice, the wire can snap if the submarine maneuvers sharply or if the torpedo passes through unexpected thermal layers in the ocean, something designers decades ago couldn't fully account for. The crew aboard Tarek had never launched a live test 71 in combat conditions. Their last training exercise using practice torpedoes had taken place in 2019. At 2:22 p.m., the command came in Farsi. Tube 1. Fire. Compressed air pushed the torpedo from the tube. Seconds later, the engine ignited and the weapon accelerated forward, the guidance wire unspooling behind it like a long strand of fishing line. Inside the submarine, operators began feeding steering commands through the copper link, guiding the torpedo toward the enormous heat signature of the carrier roughly 11 kilometers away. But the American response had already begun. 90 seconds before the torpedo even launched, the destroyer USS Halsey, an Arleigh Burke-class ship positioned about 14 nautical miles from the Nimitz, had deployed an MH-60R Seahawk helicopter. This wasn't reaction, it was coordination. The destroyer's AN/S QS-53C bow-mounted sonar had detected the acoustic pattern associated with the torpedo tube flooding sequence. Sound travels through seawater at roughly 1,500 meters per second, and the sonar operators identified the signature within seconds. The MH-60R helicopter carries specialized equipment that effectively turns it into a mobile anti-submarine platform. Its AN/AQS 22 dipping sonar lowers a listening sensor deep into the water on a cable, capable of operating at depths approaching 460 meters. The helicopter also carries sonobuoys, small disposable sensors that parachute into the ocean and transmit acoustic information back to the aircraft. Each sonobuoy costs roughly $1,400, and the helicopter can deploy dozens of them during a mission. The aircraft's onboard systems analyze the incoming acoustic signals instantly and share the information with ships and submarines through encrypted communication links. Within 3 minutes of the torpedo launch, the helicopter had deployed 8 sonobuoys in a grid between the Iranian submarine and the Nimitz. Together, those sensors formed an acoustic barrier. For the torpedo to reach the carrier, it had to pass through monitored water. The American forces weren't guessing where the torpedo might be, they were tracking it. At the same time, the carrier shifted from routine operations to an active defensive posture. From the stern of the Nimitz, the AN/SLQ-25 Nixie torpedo decoy deployed into the water. The AN/SLQ-25 Nixie is a noise-making device towed behind the ship on a cable roughly 2,000 feet long. Its purpose is simple: generate sounds that imitate the acoustic signature of the ship, drawing incoming torpedoes away from the real hull. It works well against torpedoes that hunt by listening for propeller noise or engine vibrations. But the Test-71 doesn't rely on that. Until the final phase of the attack, the weapon is wire-guided. It follows steering commands sent from the submarine, controlled by an operator watching the target's position on a fire control display. In other words, the torpedo isn't listening for a ship. It's being actively steered toward one. That creates a serious challenge. Decoys can confuse automated seekers, but they can't fool a human operator who is guiding the weapon directly. This exact issue worried naval analysts throughout the Cold War. Soviet-designed torpedoes with wire guidance or wake tracking capabilities were difficult to counter with traditional decoys. If you can't trick the weapon, you have to disrupt the guidance. That's where the USS Mississippi entered the picture. Virginia-class attack submarines are built around a simple principle: stealth creates advantage. The USS Mississippi measures about 377 feet in length, with a submerged displacement of roughly 7,800 tons. It's larger than the Iranian submarine, but dramatically quieter. Instead of a conventional propeller, it uses a pump jet propulsion system that reduces cavitation noise. Its outer hull coating helps absorb sonar reflections, and its S-9G nuclear reactor produces around 40,000 shaft horsepower without needing to surface to recharge batteries, eliminating the noisy diesel cycles common in older submarines. At the heart of the vessel is the BQQ-10 sonar suite, a system capable of processing enormous amounts of acoustic data. Its algorithms can separate natural ocean sounds, like shrimp colonies, from mechanical signatures many miles away. Mississippi had been tracking Tarex silently from depth. When the moment came, it didn't launch torpedoes. Instead, it used something far simpler. The submarine transmitted a single powerful active sonar ping directly toward the Iranian vessel. Just one pulse. Underwater, sound carries immense energy. The acoustic shockwave struck the submarine like a physical impact. Inside Tareq, the sudden signal was loud enough to rattle equipment and momentarily overwhelm anyone not wearing hearing protection. More importantly, it delivered a message. An American attack submarine was behind them, close enough to track every movement, close enough that its Mark 48 AD cap torpedoes, among the most capable in the world, could reach the submarine's engine room in well under 2 minutes. The Mark 48 represents decades of refinement in underwater weapons. Each torpedo weighs about 3,500 pounds and carries a 650-pound high-explosive warhead. Powered by a high-energy monopropellant engine, it can exceed 55 knots and travel more than 50 kilometers. Its guidance system combines fiber optic wire control, advanced sonar, and autonomous targeting capabilities that allow the weapon to continue searching even if the guidance link is lost. These torpedoes are designed to detonate beneath a ship's keel, creating a powerful bubble effect that can break the vessel's structure from below. The Iranian captain now faced a decision with no comfortable outcome: continue guiding the torpedo and risk immediate retaliation, or abandon the attack. He chose the latter. The guidance wire was cut. Instantly, the Test 71 Torpedo lost its steering commands. Now operating independently, it switched to its terminal search mode. Its onboard sonar activated, sending out rapid pings as it searched for the large hull it had originally been aimed toward. But the weapon's seeker technology dated back to the early 1980s. The waters of the Gulf of Oman are complex, filled with shifting thermal layers that bend and scatter sound. To the torpedo's older sensors, the carrier's wake and the surrounding temperature gradients created a confusing acoustic environment. The torpedo began circling, searching. After 6 minutes, the weapon's battery power started to drop. Its motor slowed as the onboard computer recognized it had failed to acquire a clear target. Then the warhead detonated. The explosion occurred roughly 340 meters off the Nimitz's starboard quarter. The underwater blast sent a powerful pressure wave through the surrounding water. It wasn't close enough to damage the hull, but it was close enough to be felt. Across the carrier, sailors felt the deck shudder. Shockwaves passed through compartments, triggering alarms and sending damage control teams moving through the ship. The carrier's double hull structure absorbed the energy without major structural stress. Instead of focusing on the ship, most of the blast energy dissipated into the surrounding ocean. Damage assessment began immediately. 14 minutes later, the report came back. Minor flooding in a ballast tank. Hull integrity intact. Propulsion systems operational. Flight deck status green. The Nimitz stayed on course without slowing. 4 minutes after the blast, the Iranian submarine surfaced. 68 sailors climbed onto the rust-streaked deck and looked across an empty horizon. No American ships in sight, no aircraft overhead, just open water. What they understood in that moment was difficult to ignore. They had been tracked the entire time. They had been allowed to launch, and then their attack had been quietly neutralized without a single weapon fired in their direction. Below the surface, the USS Mississippi continued to follow them. The American submarine shadowed the vessel all the way back to Bandar Abbas. Every acoustic signature was recorded, every maneuver cataloged, every weakness documented. The Virginia-class submarine never revealed its exact position. It never launched a torpedo. It didn't need to. But the story didn't end there. 43 hours later, another Iranian Kilo-class submarine experienced severe flooding during training exercises in the Mediterranean. Official statements blamed mechanical failure. Western intelligence analysts noticed something else: the timing. Immediately after the encounter in the Gulf of Oman, the USS Mississippi had transmitted detailed acoustic data on all 3 Iranian Kilo-class submarines to 5th Fleet Command. The signal was unmistakable. Their movements were no longer hidden. From a numbers perspective, the comparison was stark. Iran launched a single Test 71 Mk torpedo with an estimated replacement cost of about $500,000. The 6-day patrol, fuel, logistics, crew operations, and support likely cost several $1 million more. On the American side, the defensive response required no weapons. The most tangible expenses were 8 sonobuoys deployed by the helicopter, about $1,400 each, plus routine flight operations already built into the carrier group's daily schedule. The total cost of consumable equipment used to monitor and manage the situation was minimal compared to the scale of the operation. There were no casualties. No structural damage to the carrier. No interruption to mission activity. But the deeper impact wasn't financial. It was informational. Every sound the submarine produced during its 6-day patrol, propeller noise, machinery vibrations, maneuver patterns, was captured and analyzed. Those acoustic fingerprints become part of long-term naval tracking databases used to identify vessels in future encounters. In modern naval operations, information like that has long-term strategic value. Encounters at sea rarely resemble the dramatic battles often imagined. Most of the time, they are shaped by detection networks, sonar systems, and constant monitoring across vast distances. Surface fleets operate alongside underwater sensors, aircraft patrols, and submarines that may never reveal themselves. In this environment, the key factor isn't always firepower, it's awareness. The Nimitz strike group continued its patrol. Flight operations resumed shortly after the incident, and the event was logged through normal reporting channels. For the carrier's thousands of sailors and aviators, it was another routine day at sea. For naval planners studying the encounter afterward, it became another reminder of how underwater surveillance, coordination between ships and aircraft, and acoustic intelligence shape modern maritime security. If you found this breakdown useful, consider subscribing and sharing the video. Your support helps bring more detailed stories and analysis of modern naval operations to the channel.